For our next cooking adventure, we're going to make sesame pork ribs. It's a dinner recipe, and we serve the rib meat over rice, which is super, super yummy. Okay, so my recipe calls for 1 onion, and so I'm going to use this yellow onion, and so I need to cut off the ends, and then I'll be able to peel the skin that's around the onion off. So I get to throw all of this away. And then I'm gonna go ahead and peel this skin off the onion. And if you're having trouble, you can use a nail or you can use the knife. And it's okay to pull that first layer of the onion off. You just wanna get all the skin. And then we're gonna chop it. But I don't know if you've ever cut onions before, or your mom has cut onions and told you about it. They make you cry. They kind of burn your eyes. So I cut it in half, and then I'm taking each half and cutting it in fourths. And then because I own it, I'm gonna go ahead and use that chopper that I had showed you with the eggs. So I had my chopper put back together because I had washed it. And so what I can do is I can take I had cut it in half, and then I made fourths basically. So I'm gonna take one of the fourths, and I'm gonna start chopping it. Although this one's a little tall, maybe I'll start with a little guy. And so I have this because I don't like to chop onions because it burns my eyes. But you can use a food processor if you have it, or you can chop by hand. A trick is to put a piece of bread in your mouth and let it hang out while you're cutting the onions, and it should absorb the fumes of the onion fumes as they come up, and it'll prevent it from getting in your eye. But this guy works super fast and easy. So we're putting the sauce together for the sesame pork ribs, and so I got out one of my favorite bowls because again, I can pour it. It doesn't matter what bowl you use. And so you're gonna make this recipe with 5 pounds of meat. I'm actually gonna triple it because I have 6 people in my family, and so I usually double the recipe so we have a little bit of leftovers. But we're actually having grandma and the aunt and uncle over tomorrow, so there's gonna be 12 of us. So I'm gonna triple the recipe. But when you guys make this, you're gonna make it a single recipe unless you're serving more than 6 people. So you're going to use 3/4 cups of brown sugar first, and I'm going to do 3 of those 3/4 cups. Okay, so you're doing 3/4 of a cup, and I have to do that 3 times. So 3 times 3/4 is 9/4, and 9/4 is really 4 goes into 9 twice, and 1/4. So 2 1/4 cups. So this is a 1 cup measuring cup for me. And if you looked at the recipe, it said packed, which means that you want to pat down your brown sugar so that you get a full cup of packed brown sugar. So I'm looking to try to make this nice and flat, and then I'm going to dump it in. And I'm going to do that twice because I need 2 1/4 for my recipe. So the next ingredient is ketchup, and you need 1/2 cup of ketchup. I'm going to use 1 1/2 cups. Now, the first time that I made this recipe, well, actually, someone brought it to me 21 years ago or 22 years ago when I had just had my first baby. Someone delivered a meal to us, and this is what they brought us. And John and I liked it so much that I asked for the recipe. And so now I've made it 150,000 times since then. But when I first made it, I thought, how gross. You're mixing sugar with ketchup, and I don't even like ketchup. And then later we're going to add some soy sauce and honey. They just sound kind of terrible together. But I'm telling you that it is the best taste ever. So I'm going to use my spatula to make sure that I get all of the ketchup out of my measuring cup. Just kind of make sure that I get everything that I can. Recipe, the next ingredient is the rice cider vinegar, but because I had my measuring cup out, I'm going to go ahead and do my soy sauce. You probably don't have as big of a jug as I do, but because we're Asian and because I need gluten-free, I have to buy it by the gallon. And so it's 1/2 cup of soy sauce. So you're just going to pour in 1/2 cup. I'm going to use 1 1/2 because I'm tripling. and you're just gonna add it on top. And again, you can put these ingredients in any order. So I'm just doing it this way because it makes sense because of the measuring cup I have out right now. So I'm gonna do my honey. And so it calls for a 1/4 cup honey. So I'm just gonna pour it right into the same measuring cup. I'm gonna use 3/4 cups to triple it. But a trick to your honey, sometimes when your honey sits in the cupboard, it starts to solidify, and you can see like the sugar molecules at the bottom of the honey. And so all you have to do is heat it in the microwave and it will liquefy, and then you can then shake it up a little bit and use it, and it'll be totally tasty and totally fine. So you're gonna pour your honey into your mixture. Now remember, you're making dinner, so you probably want a vegetable to go with this meal. We're definitely going to make some rice to go with this meal. But start thinking about what vegetable and sides you would like. Maybe a salad and a vegetable. Okay, I'm going to be done with my big guy now, and I'm going to go get my measuring. So tablespoon has the capital T, and it's the biggest one. And you need 2 tablespoons of either like cider vinegar or rice vinegar. I'm using apple cider vinegar. Doesn't matter which one. And so you need 2 tablespoons. So you want your liquid to be flat at the top of your tablespoon and then pour it in. Notice I'm doing it over the bowl. If I get a little extra, it's probably not that big of a deal. But if you're worried, do it over the sink so you don't put, way too much in. So remember, I'm tripling, so I need 6 of these guys instead of 2. So the next dry ingredient is the 1 teaspoon of ground ginger. So I have my ground ginger and I have my 1 teaspoon. So sometimes it doesn't fit. So you might have to pour it out into a bowl and then scoop it. Or you can have a measuring cup that does teaspoons. So I'm gonna pour my ginger into my measuring spoon, but I'm gonna do it over this bowl so that if I spill, I can pick it back up and it's clean. And I'm gonna make sure that I level off my spoon before I use it. So the recipe calls for only 1 teaspoon of this ground ginger. And so you just throw it in. Again, I'm using a triple recipe. So I'm gonna get myself 2 more of these guys. And then anything that, spilt into the bowl, I'm just gonna carefully put back into the container. My bowl was clean and my teaspoon only used ground ginger. So I'm just scraping it back into the container. Set my bowl aside. So the next ingredient is 1/2 of a teaspoon of red pepper flakes. And so the 1/2 usually fits pretty nicely. We actually really like spice, so I usually double this for our recipe. So it calls for 1/2 of a teaspoon, and I'm gonna do 1 teaspoon for my recipe, and then I'm gonna triple it. So that really means I'm gonna put in 3 teaspoons or 6 of these halves. So I've been making this for a long time, and so that's why I know that we like more and that it's okay for our family. For you, I would recommend doing the recipe as is, and then if you would like to try it with a little more, then try doubling the red pepper next time. So the next ingredient is salt, and so it calls for 1 teaspoon of salt. If you're watching your salt intake, maybe someone in your family has had a heart attack, then maybe you want to watch your salt intake and maybe you want to cut this in half. But I'm going to go ahead and use 1, and because I am, again, tripling, I need 2 more. Okay, and so that's all of the ingredients that we need. So I'm going to, because we have everything, I'm just going to mix it up. And it's a little bit thick because of the sugar. So you just kind of have to stir and mix it up. And then I just want to remind you, this will store in your refrigerator for up to about a week. So it's something that you can make on the weekend and then put it in your crock pot the day that you want to eat it. So it really helps when you're like meal prepping and you know you're going to have a busy week and you want to help mom or dad. By cooking, you could make this sauce ahead of time. Okay, when it's all stirred, then you're kind of good to go with the sauce. And so now all you have to do is prep the meat. We cut the onions, we have the sauce, and so now all you have to do is cut your meat. Okay, so this is the rib meat that that you'll probably get at the store, and this is about what 5 pounds looks like. And so you're just gonna open it up and you're gonna pull it out. I try to buy the ones without bones, but I think I made a mistake and bought the one with a bone in it this time. It's not a big deal. You'll just cut around the bone. Okay, so you wanna ask your mom if she has a crock pot. If she does, I would recommend using the crock pot. And so you're gonna get the pan part of the crock pot at this point. And when you cut your meat, then you're gonna put it right over into the pan of the crock pot. My crock pot won't hold 15 pounds. So I'm using the big giant pan that I use for my turkey. And this will go in the oven. So if you don't have a crock pot, you can use any sort of a pan that will go in an oven. Okay, so this type of a pan would also be good. It has a lid, and the lid doesn't have plastic on it. So this pan would go in the oven. This pot would not go in the oven because even though it has a lid that matches and goes with it, it's got plastic handles, and so we don't put this kind of stuff in the oven. It has a glass lid, but it has plastic on the top of the glass lid, and so again, not an oven pan. So make sure that whatever you're using, if you have a crock pot, use that. If you don't, then find a pan that's allowed to go in the oven. Okay, so I'm gonna take my favorite giant knife, and I'm gonna be really careful, and I'm gonna cut this meat. And so this meat is already, you know, cut for me in this kind of size pieces. And I don't want to cut my pieces too small because the meat will shrink when it's cooking. And so I'm cutting pretty big chunks. I also am not going to cut off this fat, even though I really want to, because it kind of bothers me. I'm not going to, because it cooks off in the oven and it won't be there when you eat the meat. And so what I do is I siphon the fat off of the top of my liquid in my pan after I've cooked it, because it does bother me a little bit. But the fat is good for the cooking process, and it's good flavor. And then, like I said, it won't be on your meat when you eat it. So you're just cutting, you know, kind of big chunks, and you're throwing them into whatever pot mom or dad said was okay to use for this project. So all my meat is cut and put into my pot, and I had already chopped up my onions, so I'm just going to pour them in on top. They will simmer in the juices in the meat as it's cooking, and then I'm going to take the sauce that we already made, and I'm just going to kind of pour it over the top. And I'm really not going to worry about stirring or mixing. It's really not that big of a deal. As it's cooking, I probably will stir it a little bit, but it's just nice and thick, and it's going to kind of coat over the top, and I'll be able to put it in the oven, or if you're in a crock pot, you can put it in the crock pot. So make sure that you check the timing and the temperature between the oven and the crock pot. And then that's basically it. It's going to cook, and you're going to serve it over rice. Here's the finished meal. And then we decided to make it a full meal by adding a salad, strawberries, and a potato side dish.